Hello and welcome everyone to today's cloud coaching session. My name is Tara Van Cleve and I'm a marketing event manager for the developer initiative here at Oracle. Today we're excited to introduce you to OCI DevOps Service and deploy artifacts to instance groups within OCI. We'll also be recording the session and the link to the recording will be sent to you via email in the next couple of days. If you have any questions during the webinar, we've set up a channel in our developer public Slack called Cloud Coaching North America that you can access at the QR code or at bit.ly/ODevRel_Slack. Once you're in, you'll land in the general channel, and from there, you can search for the webinar channel. We'll also be checking the Zoom chat and the Zoom Q&A areas throughout the webinar, and we'll open up for live Q&A after the demo concludes. Today's webinar will be presented by Supriya Thirvakadu, Senior Cloud Engineer. So without further ado, I will turn it over.
Hey everyone, I'm Supriya, a Senior Cloud Engineer from the Code Innovate team. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about automating CI/CD using the OCI DevOps for deploying artifacts to the instance groups. So let's go ahead and then talk over the agenda. So here what we're going to do is we're going to discuss about what do we mean by DevOps. And then we will go over the overview about the OCI DevOps service. And then I will take you guys through the instance group deployment architecture, wherein we are going to discuss what instance group is, and we'll discuss about the demonstration. And then we will take you guys through the console walkthrough, so that we'll just walk you through the console. And then I'll show you guys a quick demonstration. And then we'll be discussing about the Code Innovate program overview, followed by the questions. So that being said, let's talk DevOps. DevOps is a collaboration of deployment, that is development and operations, to build and deliver the secure software at top speed. So here we do have development team as well as operations team who are going to work together in order to build and have the shared accountability. So the reason why the DevOps is more reliable is that because we are going to have improved collaboration and accountability for your business outcomes. So it will help you guys to stay more competitive and add more value to your customers in the most fast-paced manner. So that being said, let's talk about the OCI DevOps platform. So OCI DevOps platform is nothing but it is a fully managed SaaS service offered natively within Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So it will help you to provide a complete set of features to automate this continuous integration and deployment needs. So it gives you everything possible from the end-to-end lifecycle. So it will help you to simplify the OCI developer experience with the help of software delivery and automation. So let's talk about cloud native. So here we are not going to use any servers, like there is no DevOps servers to maintain and operate. And then we have CI/CD workflows, which are being integrated into the OCI platform. Here we are using the logging service, notifications, identity, and security. So when it comes to security, you could securely deploy your compute host. You could use your OCI Vault service in order to store your secret credentials, and then be able to use that within the OCI DevOps platform. Here, the developers have the flexibility. So you do have the flexibility to use the CI/CD of your choice. So let's say you wanted to use Jenkins. So you could use that as a CI platform, whereas you could use the DevOps as a CD platform. And you would use the plugins which is inbuilt within OCI DevOps for you to leverage the deployment pipeline. And then we do have developer-friendly pricing. That is, you're being charged just for the resources which you are deploying using the DevOps, but not the platform itself. So let's say we have a scenario. I'm a developer, right? So I'm able to commit the code changes. So whenever I commit the code changes, it triggers, it is getting committed to the GitHub repository. So we do have the GitHub repository within the OCI platform itself, or you could also leverage your own GitHub repository. So let's say you have an ID within github.com. So you could use the same ID, you could use the same repository within the OCI platform. You could just mirror your existing repository with GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Visual Builder Studio, as well as other services. And then you'll be able to build this pipeline. So as and when I commit the code changes, you're able to trigger the build process. So after you trigger the build process, you're able to run the build and you can test the artifacts before you could deliver the artifacts. So here you could deploy your artifact into multiple artifact repositories. You could either pick your container registry for you to store all your container-based images within the registry itself, or also you could use artifact registry. So the artifact registry is where you're going to store your YAML code or any unstructured data. It could be even the zip files or any unstructured file which you want to store within the artifact registry or a generic registry. So after you deliver the artifact, the next step is that you're going to trigger the deployment process, right? So you need to use the deployment pipeline for this. So once you create, here the procedure which is mentioned here is absolutely an example. You could define the procedure as you want, like you could create your own pipeline. So the deployment can be configured based on your need. Here you're going to deploy into your dev environment and you could perform like certain integration tests and so on. And then you could also integrate the approval workflow. So let's say you have a list of approvers who needs to approve before you could deploy onto your production system. So you could also embed an approval workflow within this platform, and then deploy onto the any OCI platform. So here you could deploy on your virtual machine, bare metal, your OKE environment. That is, you could deploy onto your OKE clusters, or you could deploy onto your OCI functions as well. So OCI functions is nothing but a serverless platform for you to run the code whenever you need. So whenever you want to execute the code, that is what you're being charged for, not otherwise. So that being said, let's discuss a little bit more about the OCI DevOps service and its benefits. So the reason why we are all here is because we wanted that level of automation, right? So you want to simplify and speed up your software development. So the main reason why we want to do is because you want to eliminate the manual errors, right? So you want to eliminate manual error-prone methods of application integration and deployment and increase the reliability of operations. So you want to release the features very quickly at a rapid amount of time. So you want to do it rapidly, right? So you want to automate your entire CI/CD workflow. You would like to use the fully managed OCI native CI/CD pipelines. You could also take advantage of the cloud security. That is, let's say I want to deploy my artifact, right? So I want to deploy my container images within my container repository. So what OCI does is that you would also enable the container image scanning. That is, it'll check the security vulnerabilities within the image which you are been deploying onto the OCI platform. And then it'll compare against the common vulnerability and exposures database. So this database is constantly being updated. It is going to verify the threats against that database, and then it will provide you that whether the image is having a threat or not. And to ensure the images that are not being modified, so make sure that the images which you are uploading onto the container registry is not being modified. We could also sign these images. So there is a signing which is enabled, which you can sign these images so that you're delivering this images within the OCI registry. So this can be done using the master encryption key stored in the OCI vault. Right, so you could leverage like secret keys and so on in order to encrypt, and then you're able to use that for your signing purposes. You could control the CI/CD pipeline using the IAM policies. So let's say you wanted like certain users to have the rights to build the pipeline, and certain other users to be able to deploy, and certain users to be able to approve the request, right? So you can give different types of permissions to each of these individual users or the groups with the help of the IAM policies. And then comes the governance. And the most important thing is that you wanted to rectify errors if there are any errors during this CI/CD process, right? So you want to see and have that end-to-end visibility of the commits, which the user is being made. So it's easy for you to search and debug issues using the OCI logging and monitoring services, so that like you have the end-to-end visibility and be able to quickly make any changes if there is any. Let's discuss about the continuous integration, right? So you pay for, here you are using serverless pricing. That is, you're paying for the consumed memory as well as compute, but not otherwise. Like the platform is free of cost. However, the resources which you're deploying, that is the memory and the compute capacity, the OCPUs, is all what you're being charged for. And also you're charged for the code repositories, that is storage within the platform. And you could also create the concurrent builds with the dynamic limits. You could create your own builds and then customize it based on your need. And as I said, while I was discussing about the OCI DevOps, we can integrate with multiple code repositories. So you could use GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, and so on. And you could also have host your own private Git repositories, so that like only you or your team has access to that repository. As I said, like you will have the complete end-to-end platform. So you could connect the deployments you could connect the deployments from the build pipeline. So you could trigger a deployment pipeline from the build pipeline itself. You could trigger a commit. So that is, as soon as you commit some changes onto your local system, you're able to trigger the build process onto the OCI DevOps platform. And then you can deliver the artifacts. So as in when in the build pipeline itself, once you build the process, the next step is to deliver the artifacts. So you could do that within the OCI artifact repository. And as I said, like you could build the secrets, manage the build secrets with the help of the OCI vaults. So let's go through the continuous deployment, right? So you can have different types of release strategies for you to reduce the downtime and increase the recovery, faster recovery. So there are different types of release strategies. You could pick the blue-green deployment or the canary stage deployment. So the reason being, we are trying to minimize the downtime and increase the confidence for your deployment. You could have like cross-region deployment. You could perform the global deployment across the regions. And also, like you could connect to your workflows. Let's say I have my Jenkins and everything already configured, right? So I can create my build process using the Jenkins, and then with the help of Jenkins plugin, what you will be able to do is you're able to trigger the deployment pipeline, and then deploy your code onto your OCI compute or Kubernetes or functions and so on. And this also provides you a flexibility for you to orchestrate your multi-cloud deployments with the help of the Spinnaker. So we do have Spinnaker integration with OCI, which allows the customers to follow continuous integration and delivery best practices to deploy your application on OCI. You can do it repeatedly in the automated manner. And there is an option for you to pick either automatic rollback or the manual rollback of the deployment stage. So let's say I wanted to revert to my previous version of the commit. So as in when I commit the changes, I want to make sure that if there are any errors, I want to roll back to the previous version of the commit. Then you could set up that automatic rollback. And in case, if you don't want to do that and want to make sure that to check whether there are errors and stuff like that, you could use the manual rollback option as well. So now let's go through the Notional Architecture. So here we have been discussing about the topic of instance group. So what does instance group mean? So instance group is nothing but you're creating, let's say I have 10 instances, right? So I do have 10 instances in my compartment, and I want to make sure that I'm able to group these instances so that like I'm able to deploy my artifacts very easily. So what I would do is I would create an instance group where I'm grouping all these instances together. So in this example, which I'm going to show you, I've grouped all the dev environments as well as the prod environments into 2 different instance groups. So let's talk about the architecture more in detail. So let's say we have a developer. So what the developer will do is that he would commit the changes, it gets triggered, and then you're able to make these changes gets updated onto OCI code repository, and then it is going to trigger the build pipeline. So the build pipeline, you're able to deliver the artifacts, you're able to build the process and be able to deliver the artifact to artifact registry, and then you're able to roll this deployment onto the instance group rolling update stage. So within the deployment pipeline, you could create the rolling into the instance group deployment as well, along with the other deployments. So here you're deploying your artifact into multiple instances within the instance pool. So you do have a pool and you're deploying on all the instances at once. And then you're able to manage all of these virtual machines using the OCI load balancer. You're able to just use one load balancer and be able to access these instances. And then you're able to see all of this, the logging, monitoring, notifications, and all of that within the console itself. You're able to check all the logs and you're able to monitor the metrics. You're able to receive the notifications. And also, you could give different permissions to different users within the group. So I think this will all start making more sense once we see all this in action, right? So let's go through the console. Let me go ahead and then share my screen wherein I've already logged into my Oracle Cloud Console. As you see that I've logged in with my user account into this tenancy. So the first thing I would do is that, let's say I have a group of users and I want to give the users different permissions, right? So I'll click on the navigation and then I will go to the identity and security. So here, when I click on the users, I'll be able to create the user and then add the user into the group. So after that, we would define the policies, right? So here, let me pick the root compartment where I want to define my policy. As you see, there are a bunch of policies, but we'll create one on our own. Let's create a policy called as DevOps policy. And then I will select the policy information from here. So there are like two different approaches to this. Like you could create a policy for your DevOps. Let's go to DevOps and then select the policy template. Here, like we do have different types of templates which are already available. So one thing which I want to do is I want to deploy onto instance group. So let's select this policy. So as and when I select this policy, I see that there are like different policy statements here, which will be created for me. So I would like to create a dynamic group before that. So the dynamic group is where you're able to give different accesses to the resources within the OCI instance. So let's say I wanted the DevOps, right? The DevOps service to be able to access the resources within the compartment. So for which what I would do is I would, let me go ahead and then duplicate the screen. I can go ahead and then create a dynamic group. So let's click on the navigation on the top left and click on the identity and security. Click on the dynamic groups, and this is where I'm able to create my dynamic group. So let me go ahead and show you one of the dynamic group which I've already created. As you see here, like I've configured the DevOps deploy pipeline to access the resources within the compartment. So I've given the compartment name and I'm defining the policies so that like the DevOps instance is able to access the other resources. The deploy pipeline is able to access the resources. So this I'm configuring, and after that I'm going to configure my policy. Here I'm going to select which policy I want to do. So let's say I have my FN group policy, which was created by me. So I will go ahead and then select which compartment I wanted to deploy this on. So I'll select my own compartment. Compartment is nothing but a logical grouping of related resources. So I can group all my projects in one compartment. Or let's say if you have a developer, so you wanted all the developers to access a certain compartment and be able to access them. So this is one procedure. Another procedure, let's say if I want to add more policies on my own. So I would like to use the same policies and I can start writing my own policies. So there is a very detailed documentation for you to verify all the policies here. Like you can take a look at it and then you can start building the policy on your own. So that being said, now we'll focus more on the OCI DevOps platform, right? So the first thing which you would like to do is you can click on the human icon in the top right, and then you'll see your own profile. Once you click on your profile, you'll be able to see there are different resources here. One thing which you want to do is that you want to create your own auth token. So once you generate your own auth token, what happens is that it helps you to leverage these token and then be able to access the GitHub repository within the OCI DevOps platform. So for your user, you're uniquely able to access the repository because you have the authentication using the auth token. So for you to access the DevOps projects, so let's click on the navigation again on the top left, and then click on the developer services. Here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the DevOps project, and in that, I'm going to click on the projects. Here, like I'll pick the compartment. As I said, like I'm going to pick my compartment, which I want to use. So I could create a new project. So I'll click on the create project here, and then enter my project name. So let's say DevCS demonstration, or demonstration, and I can select a topic. So what do I mean by topic? So topic means it is a communication channel for sending the messages to its subscriptions. So basically a topic can have 0, 1, or multiple subscriptions that are notified whenever the message has been published to a topic. So here I've already created like a topic here. So I'm going to just select the topic and then create my DevOps project. For the interest of time, what I've done is I've already created a DevOps empty project here. And then as and when you see a project like this, you'll see that here is the console, and you'll see different things, right? So you could enable the logs. Let's click on enable log, so that like you're able to log all of these, or in case if there are any issues with the build process, you're able to see all the logs right here. And let's click on enable logs, so that it'll help you to store all the logs at one place. So now that we have done this, you're able to see that there are different options here. First thing which you want to do is that you're going to create your own repository, right? So first, for you to create your own repository, you click on create repository and then create it. Or you could click on mirror repository. You can click on mirror repository and then select the create connection. And here you can pick the type of connection you want to create. There are different options. As I said, like you could pick any type of connection, SaaS connection you want. And then you could enter your vault credentials. Like you can, I haven't configured a vault here, but then you could create your own vault credentials and have the credentials there instead of like storing it locally here just for the sake of security. So now what we would do is we will go ahead and then click on the repository which I've created. So this is a blank repository. So once you create a repository, you'll be able to see the procedure for you to clone a repository and so on. So this is exactly the same as if you're familiar with GitHub, this is exactly the same. So what I would do now, I'll just copy the code here and be able to use my favorite IDE, which is Visual Studio Code. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to go to my DevOps project and then just paste this git clone command here. So now that I've done it, let's clone this repository into my local system. So the IG demo, that is instance group demo, is right here. So because I already have my code ready, so I'm just going to use the same code. And then copy paste into my own repository. All right. So now what we have done is we have the files ready in our own repository. So the next step is to commit the changes to your own repository. So let's do one thing. Let's click on git space add. Okay, so I need to cd into this folder. So let me go and then go to this IG demo, and then let's do ls. All right, so now we are into the repository. Now what we'll do is we'll just now do git space add. And then now we have added all the files. Next we'll do git commit -m and then initial commit. And then we'll push this code changes. So I'm able to push the code straight away is because like the credentials are already been cached. So here I've actually used my GitHub, the username, the my identity profile /username and then the password as token value. All right, so now let's verify whether we are able to see all of these within our files section. So let's review them. Okay, so it was empty and we just made these changes and you're able to see the initial commit right here. All right, so once you create your code repository, so the next step is that let's do one thing. Let's go to the environments and then let's create an environment. You can click on create environment and you can pick the type of environment you want to choose. Here, I'm going to use my instance group environment. So let's say dev environment, and then click on next, and then you can then add instance. So here I've already configured the dev instance and the prod instance. So in the dev instance, I have one instance. So I can click on add instances and add as many instances as you want. Or you could we'll go to the prod instance and then we'll go ahead and then see if we have all the instances which we thought about. All right, so I think one instance is missing. So let's click on the Frankfurt 2 and I'm going to add this instance. So these are all being grouped into the prod instance. Now, what the next step is we are supposed to do is that when we have configured the code repositories and then the environments, the next step is the build pipeline. So in the build pipeline, we would create a build process. So before that, let me show you quickly about the artifact registry. So we'll click on the developer services again. And then here we have configured an artifact registry. So this is the repository which we created just for the purpose of this demonstration. You could create your own repositories. It's straightforward. And once you create a repository, I've used this repository multiple times. So that's the reason you're able to see the list of artifacts right here, right? So, but we are going to configure this repository to store our artifact. Let's go back to your DevOps console, and then you will go ahead and then you will click on the create build process. So let's go ahead and then DevOps build, and then click on create. So you could either save the stack or you could create it. So let's click on create. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to add a stage. So this is a canvas. So there's a canvas which has been built for you. You'll click on this add stage so that you can see the continuous integration, and then you have different optional steps. So you pick the managed build and then click on next, and then type in your build job. So you select the build job, and then you could select the different types of shapes. Like either the default is 8GB one with AMD processor. It's a Linux container image, or you could pick the 16GB one. For this demonstration, I'm just going to go with the default one. And then I'm going to use the build_spec.yaml. So I will create this build process, but at the same time, I'll show you what we have done in the code as well. So the build_spec.yaml is something which we will be using. The reason being, it contains the build steps and the settings that the build pipeline uses to run a build process. So let's go to your Git repositories, and you can see the build_spec.yaml. So when you scroll down, you'll see that there are certain artifacts which have been generated. You're using certain commands, certain steps, and so on. But we will go through this code more in detail. So we'll leave this as is because that's already available. Or if you have to create your own build path, you can do that as well. Now select the primary code repository. Here, I'm going to select the OCI code repository and then select the IG demo because that's the repository which we just created. So once I do that, the next step is that I'm going to click on add so that the build step is complete. So now that we have successfully completed the build step, and we'll test it very soon, the next step is to deliver the artifact. Let's click on the plus button again here and click on add stage. It's fairly straightforward. You can click on the deliver artifacts and then click on next. So here we will just create a deliver job, right? And then we are going to select the artifact. So you could either create an artifact or select the existing artifact. So we will go ahead and then create an artifact here. So for creating an artifact, let's see the artifact which we have. We'll see that there are certain output artifacts which have been generated. One is store R12 archive. Let's type in store R12 archive. So this is going to be a general artifact where you're going to archive the files and then store it within this archive. And then you're going to select the where exactly you want to store this. So you're going to store it in the artifact registry. So I'm going to pick file-based trigger, that is the artifact registry. And then you're going to select either the existing location, that is you're going to point to the artifact, or you could like write your own custom artifact location and version. So let's type in the artifact path. So the artifact path is nothing but the store R12 artifact. And then here you're going to mention the version, right? So the version is, I'm going to automatically generate a version using, and then I'm going to use that variable here. So let's type in like $ and then your version number, that is build run underscore hash. So I'm generating this hash value within the build code. And then I'm selecting here, select yes, substitute placeholders. That means like I'm able to update the version number with the dynamic placeholders. Now I'm going to click on add. So here I've added my store R12 archive, and then I'm going to store the result here. And I have another artifact. So for which I need to create an artifact here. Let's select the instance deploy manifest. So this is my deployment manifest. I'm going to select the instance group deployment configuration. So the reason why I did that is that I'm going to pass on the deploy underscore spec.yaml from my from my build step to the deployment step. So that's the reason I'm just passing the YAML file through this deployment configuration. Now I'm going to select the artifact registry. I will select the file-based trigger registry and then select the custom artifact just as the previous step. And I'm going to paste the same values, the instance deploy underscore manifest here, and then the version number. So the version number is this. I'm sorry, it's going to be build run underscore hash. Okay, now I'll click on add. So I'm going to have the output right here and then click on add. All right. So now that we created the build job and deliver job, let's check through the code, right? So let's understand the code, the code repository further in detail. So here, these are basically dummy files. Like it's a very simple project, which I thought I would show you guys. So it's a file.json wherein you have just a simple JSON values. I have some images. I do have my build spec.yaml and then file.json where I'm just storing my JSON files. And then looks like there is a simple error. That's fine. And then we do have file.yaml. And then you have sample.sh, which is where it is showing echo hello world. And then here you're in this build spec, what exactly I'm doing is that I'm creating a file-based trigger. That is, so this is like a $OCI primary source code directory, right? So this is the build underscore spec.yaml. It is having a certain syntax, but how did I get this code? So what I've done is I have went through the OCI documentation. So here I do have the build underscore spec.html, and you see that there is a build specification right here. I've just used the same syntax which is available here and then used it within my code. So here I have my generic artifacts. These are my input artifacts and then certain steps. So each of the steps, if you observe, you have like command, you have the name, shell type and all of that. And you're listing the commands here. And after you write down the commands, you're having the output artifacts. So that is the artifact is which you're going to pass on to the deliver artifact section. So that being said, let's go back to our build process, right? So here I've written that it starts with the root. However, these are certain sample steps. I'm seeding into the primary source code directory and running the echo commands, basically like a couple of echo commands, and then I'm able to see the difference of the, I have just committed my code changes. So I'm able to see the list of differences of the files which are just been added into the repository. I'm only archiving those files. So I'm just archiving the changed files into the R12 ID underscore files.zip. And then I'm able to cd into the repository and then be able to store these files and then list them, right? So I'm doing all these steps right here. And in the next step on failure, I do have certain commands to be run. And I'm also creating a unique file tag. So that is like build run hash is where I'm going to randomly generate a unique tag so that like I'm able to uniquely sign each of the images which I'm creating. And then, so this R12 ID files, which are being generated, I'm storing it within the store R12 archive. And then I'm passing the deploy underscore spec. So in the deploy underscore spec, these are like very basic commands where I'm just going to go to the instance and then copy all of this zip files which I'm generating and storing it within the instance. And I'm able to perform certain commands like pwd, who am I, and also running some sample shell script. Okay, so now that I went through this deployment spec.yaml, now we'll go back to our console. So after we create the build job, deliver job, so the next step is that we have to create a deployment job. So for which I will go to my deployment pipelines and then create my own pipeline. I'll click on create pipeline and then I'll create a deploy pipeline. And then here I can add some, in this canvas, I will be able to add some stages. So I'll click on the plus icon or I can click on the stage and then select the type of deployment. So you see that there are many things which you can do here. So one is you can apply or manifest to your Kubernetes cluster. As I said, we could also create like a blue-green deployment or a canary deployment. In this case, you're selecting the instance group deployment. However, you could deploy it onto your functions, install Helm chart, and then you could pause for approvals and so on, right? So you could do multiple things within this console. So for this demonstration, I'm going to show you deploying instance incrementally through the compute instance groups, and then click on next. Here, I'm going to enter my deploy to dev. So I'm going to create a stage wherein I'm going to deploy into my dev instance. And then I'm going to select the dev instance, which the instance group which we created, that is a dev instance, and then select the artifact. So you remember in the previous step, we have created the artifact. So I'm going to pick the same artifact for my deployment configuration. Because it is deployment configuration, the type automatically got picked and I'm able to select the configuration right here. So I'll click on save changes. And there is another artifact which I wanted to use. So I'll select the store R12 artifact where I'm going to store all my R12 zip files here. All right. So here I haven't configured the load balancer, but if you have a load balancer available, you could use that. So as I said, like there are two steps. One is you could either automatically roll back to the previous build, or you could use the manual rollback. So I'm going to just use the manual rollback. And then you could roll out policy. There are two different types of rollout policies. So rollout by percentage, rollout by count. So by percentage, it means that you can enter the percentage value between 1 and 100. And then the value controls the maximum percentage of instances that are deployed and are not running at the same time. So you could also use by rollout by count. So that is the maximum count of instances is what you're going to select, which are not running. All right, so let's select rollout by count. So in the dev instance, I literally have just one instance. So I'm just going to select one here. You can pick the failure failure policy. Here I'm going to pick none, but there are two other failure policies for you to define the percentage of compute host that fail, after which the stage fails, right? So you could pick the type of failover policies here. So let's click on add here, and then you'll be able to add the deploy to dev. So after you deploy to dev, the next step is that you're going to deploy it to the production instance. You're going to deploy the artifacts to the production instance. So let's click on add stage here and then select the same steps. So now you might be familiar. We will be going ahead and then deploying it to prod instance. So now you'll select the environment and then select the artifact, select the R12 artifact and click on save changes, and you'll scroll down and then you'll roll out by count. So here we do have two instances, but we'll select one, roll out by count, and then click on add. All right. So, but I forgot, we'll also have to add an approval step. So you don't have to really add one by one. You can click on the plus button here and then click on add stage for you to select your own control step during this process. So let's select the pause the deployment for approval. So I'll click on this and then I'll add an approval stage. So the procedure, how it works is that like the approval team members, the approval team will have a separate unique policy which has been defined. You can pick the number of approvers, like you could select one or two or as many as you want before you could move to the next stage. So I'm going to just add one approver and then we can proceed further. So literally there are 3 stages which we have added. And then now that we created a deployment pipeline, as I said, like you could connect your build process to the deployment process, right? So you can trigger a deployment pipeline from here. So I'm going to click on trigger deployment and then click on next. And then I'm going to say trigger deployment. Okay. And then I'm going to select the deployment pipeline, which I wanted to trigger. All right. So as you see, the artifacts automatically got picked. And then I'm going to click on add. Okay. So let's do one thing. What we can do is that we will go ahead and then start off the deployment process and see what happens, right? So let's go to our DevOps build and then click on start manual run and then click on start manual run. So in this canvas, you see that there are, you can see the deployment job and you could see the build run progress and also the logs which are being collected on the right side. So, once the build job triggers, you could see that automatically there are different steps which it needs to go through. That is like it first gets the build runner, provisions the instance, and then be able to run the build process, right? So let that happen. So let's move to the next step and then let's look into the parameters. So this is the parameter section. Here is where you can add your variables. You could add your, let's say I wanted to define different environments, right? So I can just write env and then write down like dev environment or prod environment and so on. So I can define my own variables here and then use it further. And these are all the work requests which automatically gets generated in the background. You see that you could see OCI and all of that, like it, whatever is happening, right? You're creating a build pipeline, creating a build stage, and all of that has been collected here. And these are the tags which you have. So let's see what is the build history, right? You can go to your build history and you see that the build is in progress right now. So we'll come back to this, but I would also like to show you one more thing, like you could create a trigger. So the triggers is like where you're able to automatically run the build trigger from the source code repository. So what we can do is like we can create a trigger. Trigger build can be the name, and then I'm going to select the source connection here. Any updates which are being made into the code repository, right? So I'll select the code repository as IG demo, and then I can click on actions and add my own action. Here, I'm going to kickstart the build process. So DevOps build, I'm going to select, and then I can click on add action. So once I do that, I can either save this as a stack. So this automatically saves into the resource manager, or I could just I could just click on the create so that I can create this trigger. So I'll go ahead and click on create. All right. So now that I've created a trigger, what actually happens is that any changes made to the build process, any changes made to the to your code repository, as and when you commit those changes, it is going to trigger this process. So let's test it out, right? So let's see what happens. In this, let me go to my sample.sh. What I'm going to do is I'm going to echo $hostname. That is like the host name of the computer. So let me update this. The host name is, and then I'm going to echo the host name, right? So I'm just going to make this small change and I'm going to trigger this process. Let me go ahead and then click on add, and then commit -m, and then updated sample.sh. And then I'm going to push this code, right? I'm just going to do git push so that the changes are being reflected there, right? So let's go back to our build process and see what happens in the background. All right, so looks like this build got succeeded and it triggered the build process. Let's go to our deployment pipeline and see if it is working. So as and when the deploy pipeline trigger is being made, so it is going to deploy to the dev instance, and then it will wait for the approval stage. Let's also verify whether as and when we made those commit changes, so did it actually reflect onto your instance, right? So did it actually trigger the build process or not? So let's go to this place and then go to build history. As you see that this is the manual run. So this is what I've done, clicked on manual run, and then I'm able to start the build process. But the trigger build, as you see, this is the generated commit with the same commit and all that. It is triggering a build process. So this is also running. It's quite seamless, right? All right, so let's look at the DevOps build, which was created. It literally took 2 minutes, 56 seconds, which is quite reasonable. And you see that the build runner got started, and you're able to see the code repository, whatever you're using. It is able to see whatever the files are being changed. So these are all the files which are being changed. Everything is being listed here. The changed files are being archived. And so these archived is, and you're also generating the build run hash. So here is the build run hash. So let's compare if we do have this in the registry or not. So let's refresh this page, and then let's verify. So as you see here, the same artifact is being delivered into the registry. So it has been generated, and then you're going to upload the artifact. Once this is done, then it is triggering the build process. It is triggering the deployment process. So we'll go to the deployment section and then see what's happening there, right? Let's go to the deployment section, and then let's see. All right, so it's rolling out the deployment at this stage. Here, I'll go back to my console and we'll go through the deploy spec.yaml because we did not get a chance to go through in more detail. So there is a clear documentation for you to write your own deploy spec.yaml. Fairly straightforward. It's the same syntax, like you have the version number and all of that, and then you're adding those files. So files is where like you're able to copy the source code, the artifacts, into your destination. So the destination we are creating is temp, and within the temp you're storing all the files, right? And in the steps section, you'll observe that it's like we're going to use the echo commands to run to just verify if we got the build run hash values, whether these values have been passed to the deployment section, and also running the shell script which we created. Okay. All right. So in the background, let's see what all happens, right? So you see that there are some work requests here. You could also check the logs. So the logs are being generated. You can go through these logs further in detail. So as you see that each of these logs are being stored here. And if you want to go further into detail, you'll see the build pipeline ID and all of this more in detail, right? And you could see the metrics and all of that. Okay, so let's go back to our project. And so you could directly verify the deployments right here. So it's now waiting for the approval, right? So because now in this particular demonstration, I do have the permissions to approve or reject the request. So what happens is like you can go through the steps, right? So you could go through the logs and all of that, and then submit for approval. In case if everything looks good, then I would say approved. No changes, right? So I can just give some comments and then I can click on approve. And then after the approval process is done, that's when it's going to trigger the product deployment, right? So deployment into prod instances. So now that we have deployed onto the dev instance, let's see what happens actually in the dev instance, right? So let's go to your compute instance and you'll check in the instances section. We'll go to one of the instance, that is sample Linux is your dev instance. You can see that there are like, you can see a lot of input output reads. Now we'll go to your run command. You see that there are a lot of commands which are being run in the background. So as in when you run a shell script, it is going to see, you could see what is happening, right? So this is actually been accepted and you're able to run all of these files right here. Okay. We'll check the deployment again. Let's go back to your console and you'll be able to deploy it. So now that like you're able to see that there are like, so all the logs are here, right here. I'll just reduce this so that like you're able to see the entire logs. You're able to copy all the files to your repository. You could, in case if you want to check further, you could SSH into the instance individually and then verify whether these logs are being copied, these files, the archive files, which are being copied or not. But for me, I could just see all of these logs right here. So I don't really need to SSH into that system. Okay. So that being said, I believe like you all got an idea about how the deployment process works. And then now, right now, even the other build is actually requesting for approval. So let's check. Oh, it looks like this is waiting for approval now. Let's click on approve. And then the other build process also being triggered. So that being said, I believe like you got a idea at least at a high level about how the end-to-end process flow works. So we will now move forward and then I'll talk to you about the Code Innovate program. So before I could talk about the Code Innovate program, let me tell you a short story. So here we do have these kids who go on a fun trip to Legoland. So one thing which they enjoy the most is the Master Builder class, right? So basically, once the child goes and they are given the bunch of disassembled Lego pieces in a bag, and the Master Builder, the person in green, is able to show you different ways to put these Lego pieces together. However, he doesn't provide any set of instructions on how to build these Lego pieces. But at the end of the day, you see that these kids are able to build these cute little penguins, which is on the desk, which is kind of cool, right? In the simplest form, that is what a virtual code innovate is all about. So we are going to have like a hands-on experience on the Oracle Cloud Services. You could work closely with one of our Oracle engineer and then build your own use case. You could leverage your own use case. In this case, let's say if you're interested in an OCI DevOps service, then you could leverage this use case and then bring it to us, and we will help you. We will work with you together, and then we could build the first pass prototype along with you guys. So this entire program is completely free of cost, unless the requirements are being met. So that is like the basic requirement is that we need at least 4 developers and from your team, and then and a lot of enthusiasm, right? So that being said, it's going to be like a 5-day event. So it's going to be 5 half-day event. The reason being, you are going to have like continuous development throughout those 5 days in a Zoom session. So you could bring in your own use case. So this is going to be the end-to-end flow of the Coordinate experience. So you could bring in your own use case. So we will help you brainstorm and then make sure that all the logistics are in place before the event could actually begin. And on the day of the event, we'll be focusing mostly on the first day. We are going to focus on the ideation, and then followed by the code development. We are going to spend 4 hours for you to build the code together on each day. So on the day 1 is going to be ideation, followed by the code development. On the day 2, we are going to have the Scrum meeting, that is in the morning and the evening, just for 15 minutes to discuss what you have done yesterday and what you're planning to do in the next couple of days. And then we are going to spend the entire day on the code development. And on the last day, what you will be doing is you are going to showcase your prototype, which you have built, to your leadership team. So this is going to be the Code Innovate, and I'm sure like it'll be a lot of benefit for you guys, especially because you will have a lot of knowledge sharing. You'll get to know what are the best practices, especially because you're not just working by yourself, right? You're going to work along with the Code Innovate engineer, so that you get to know you can actually accelerate your development process after this. So if you're interested in this program, you could either email it to us, or you could send out your emails in the Zoom chat window. So we'll collect all of these emails and then we'll follow up with you shortly. That being said, I really appreciate you all being here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to shoot them.
All right, we are right at time. It looks like all our questions have been answered. So I'd like to thank everyone again so much for joining us here today, and we hope to see you again next time.